The MCU, without a doubt one of, if not the most successful film franchise of all time, with Avengers Endgame at one point being the highest grossing film of all time. But in later years it seems like the franchise has lost a bit of the pop it originally had. Most of the new films and shows get significantly lower ratings and worse reviews than the franchise did just a few years ago. Welcome into the Embassy of Everything, and welcome back to another video. Today we're talking about why the MCU is falling off. As mentioned, Avengers Endgame was at one point the highest grossing film of all time. It only lost the top spot when Avatar got a small re-release in Asia. At that point the franchise was bigger than ever, but unfortunately also the biggest it would ever get. Although a few of the new projects like Spider-Man No Way Home or shows like WandaVision or Loki have been decent, I feel like it's fair to say that the franchise as a whole has been on a gradual decline for the last few years. This can be attributed to a few different things, the first one being important characters leaving. The franchise started back in 2008 with the first Iron Man film, where we were first introduced to everyone's favorite genius billionaire playboy philanthropist, Tony Stark. A character that would turn out to be one of the most popular and beloved in recent time. Just a few years later, the rest of the original 6 Avengers had been introduced to fans. In the first Avengers film, even though technically Samuel L. Jackson's character, Nick Fury, was the head of the Avengers Initiative, the dynamic of who was the actual leaders became apparent throughout that film. By the end, it was quite obvious that it was Tony Stark, Natasha Romanoff and Steve Rogers who were the ones to take charge and lead the group and bind it together, with the other 3 being either possessed, confused, or a little bit of an outsider. This dynamic would carry on through the next films to come, especially with the film Captain America Civil War, with Tony Stark and Steve Rogers being the leaders in that conflict, and everyone else just picking a side. By Avengers Endgame it had become even more apparent, having Steve and Natasha gathering the old crew back, and Tony later on leading the time travel project, while the other 3 were kind of just there. Hawkeye was out slaughtering random people, Bruce Banner was still a little confused, and Thor, well, he definitely wasn't leading anyone. Now, as everyone knows by now, those 3 leading characters all leave the franchise by the end of Avengers Endgame. 3 characters that in my opinion really helped tie all the films together and made it feel like the MCU was just all one big movie compiled into different parts. And those characters now weren't there anymore. And that left a few spaces empty for who was going to, in the stories, guide the Avengers, but on the outside, who was going to guide the franchise. And it seems like Marvel has really struggled with finding someone to step into that leader role. I personally think Doctor Strange could be one of the heroes to take charge and try to at least somewhat fill Tony Stark's shoes. He did appear in Spider-Man No Way Home as kind of a leader trying to get Spider-Man to stay out of trouble. But that's pretty much been it in terms of him leading the MCU. It hasn't helped either that most of the new projects are solo projects with only one superhero in them. Which leads me on to the next point. Too many, too isolated projects. Most people have probably noticed the amount of MCU projects coming out at the moment. Back in the day we would at max get 3 movies a year, which made it feel a little more special when a new movie came out. But nowadays it's more like we're getting 4 movies and 4 shows plus a TV special a year. It seems like Marvel just wants to chew out something new all the time, and people are just getting a bit full, especially when the quality in the projects is dropping at the same time. The projects that are coming out also seem more isolated from one another than they did before. Not to say that all the movies before Endgame were all directly linked and followed one another, but you could kind of see they were all heading in the same direction. Nowadays, many of the series that are coming out are about new characters that haven't even had a cameo in another project yet, like how they introduced Spider-Man and Black Panther in Civil War before they got their own movie. And most of the movies with characters that we do know are just not as good as previous ones. They just feel random, like they don't mean or do anything beyond their own film story. As said, before, Marvel felt like one big movie compiled into different parts, but nowadays they feel like a bunch of different standalone movies that just happen to be labeled with the Marvel logo. Bad CGI. While this is probably not the biggest reason for why the MCU is falling off, it is definitely a contributing factor. It is no secret that Marvel uses a lot of CGI for their projects, and back in the days it actually looked very good. It obviously had its bad moments, but for the most part it was pretty decent. Nowadays, however, it has almost become a meme with how much bad CGI there is in the MCU, and the technology obviously hasn't gotten worse. It is not even because they hire bad VFX artists, it is because of the deadlines that the VFX artists get. Many of them have come out to complain about the ridiculous deadlines that Marvel set for them, an issue that wasn't there back in the days. Marvel has become a business way too much, where money is apparently all they see when they spew out an enormous amount of content as quickly as possible, even if the CGI is clearly not 100% completed. You would think that Marvel would be one of the best places for VFX artists to work, seeing that it is so big while they also have years of experience working with VFX artists. You would think that that experience would be apparent in the movies and shows. Apparently not. Spectacle with no significance. Ever since the portal opened up above the skies of New York in the first Avengers movie, Iron Man has kept talking about the threat from space.
I can't sleep. That up there, that's the endgame. This is it.
And since then, the stakes and the climax of the MCU kept getting bigger and bigger. In the original Avengers, the aliens came to try and take over the Earth. Then, in Avengers Age of Ultron, Ultron tried to destroy Earth completely. In Avengers Infinity War, Thanos tried to, and did, wipe out half the life in the universe. And by the end of Avengers Endgame, Thanos tried to destroy the whole universe. As you can see, the stakes and the significance of the movies kept getting bigger, therefore making the big fight scenes, the epic punchlines, and generally the climaxes of each movie actually mean something, like it had significance for the story as a whole. Little side note, looking into the future of the MCU, how can you even outdo the threat of Thanos destroying the whole universe? What threat would be worse than that? I don't think there is one, which is why I think they are struggling with people not caring anymore, because the heroes already defeated the biggest threat possible. Anyway, now that Thanos and his army, which was the same threat from the first Avengers, was gone, who were they really to fight? The saga was completed. How could they make a new villain actually have significance? Well, they couldn't, at least not yet. To give an example of this, we'll use Thor: Love and Thunder, that came out last year. They actually had what could have been a great villain in Gore, played amazingly by Christian Bale. But when it came to the final battle, it felt kind of underwhelming and meaningless. You almost didn't care if it was the hero or the villain who won the battle, which is very bad for a superhero movie. The punchline felt forced and almost cringy. Why is this? Well, partly because it has no significance to the MCU story in general. Because there isn't even one. Marvel says we're now in the multiverse saga, but they really haven't done a good job at explaining what that even means and what the stakes are. And when there are no stakes or any big threat hanging above the heroes, each project that comes out is just another superhero film where the hero fights a villain, a concept people have already seen 1,000 times. What made the Infinity Saga and the MCU as a whole so popular was that they made you care about the heroes winning. And after the heroes won, at the end of the Infinity Saga, I don't see how Marvel is gonna make people care about a new huge threat in the Multiverse Saga that just happens to come out right after the other huge threat is gone. And speaking of sagas, 2 sagas right after each other? Marvel has not tried to hide the fact that the original story beginning with Iron Man 1 and ending with Avengers Endgame was its own separate story labeled the Infinity Saga. They admit the mega story that made everyone love the MCU is over, and that the multiverse saga is a new story but in the same universe. But when they're naming them sagas, it's quite weird that they have put two sagas about the same universe with the same people right after each other. Normally a saga is a story, and when that story ends, the saga ends too. There is not a new saga created that just continues from where the other one finished. The story is done and not to be continued. For example, take the Harry Potter franchise. A long story with 8 movies that culminated in a big finale with the villain that has lured around and caused damage since the first movie being defeated. Sound familiar? Now imagine if a new film series was created, where the story would pick up right from when the last Harry Potter film ended, with the same characters and with the same world as a continuation of the exact same story. A story where you would need to create a new villain that would have to outdo the previous one in terms of threat and significance for people to even care. It sounds ridiculous, right? It would be extremely hard to make people actually care about any new threat when the biggest villain has been defeated. Well, Marvel's attempt with the multiverse saga is in my opinion them trying to do pretty much that. And it has proven to indeed be quite a difficult task, as people, rightfully so, don't really care that much anymore. I feel like before we go, I should say that I'm in no way trying to just shit on and destroy the MCU. I have actually really enjoyed watching the MCU up until after Endgame. I am simply trying to point out the issues that the MCU is facing, with the honest hope of them getting it back on track and making it feel like it did back in the day. But if they continue to make movies the way they're doing right now, I would much rather see them put an end to it. Partly also because the bad Marvel movies that are coming out at the moment are taking up spaces in the cinemas, which leads to actual great movies not getting the shine they deserve. What do you guys think? Is it possible for the MCU to become as big as it was, or is the heyday of Marvel over? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed the video, then please leave a like, it really helps out the channel. Subscribe to the Embassy of Everything to become a citizen if you want to see more in the future. Here's your passport again, sir. Cheerio and have a good day.